Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome back to another episode of Breaking Into Breaking Bad. Clifford and Caleb Humphrey. This is season 2, episode 4, and the episode is called Down. So before we get into the episode, let's give a brief synopsis because it has occurred to me that a lot of people are not rewatching this show, but maybe if we jog their memory, they'll remember this particular episode. Or if not, they'll just kind of get a sense of where things are. So let's summarize this episode. So what happens? Two kinds of destruction happen, one in Jesse's life and one in Walt's. So Jesse gets kicked out of his house that he's been living in, that his parents, we learn, own, and he's trying to survive. And then at the same time, Walt is trying to repair his relationship with Skylar, and that is not working out. And she is putting up all these walls, and both of them are being very frustrated by that. And then there's a question of justice that arises out of the episode too, where Jesse is wanting half of the money that remains in Walt's possession, which was Walt's, but because Jesse's half was lost, he feels or was taken rather in the raid by Hank. Jesse feels that he has a claim on half of Walt's money. So that question kind of permeates the whole episode too. So that's a synopsis of the episode. But what about the title? It's called Down. Caleb, why do you think it's called Down?
If you look at this episode, like both of them, well, especially Jesse, he's getting kicked while he's down. That might have some ring to it, but yeah, I mean, both of them are just not winning whatsoever, and they're just getting they're just getting beat, So I'm guessing that has something to do with it.
Yeah, the phrase down and out kind of comes up in my mind as you watch this. It's a depressing episode. Like it's a
It
depressing
was.
episode. It's a downer, we
Hmm.
might say. And then I'll say also kind of getting into the episode, it begins, these episodes always begin in a very interesting way that
Hmm.
seems to sort of foreshadow what's going to happen in the episode. But this particular one ends in a way that just leaves you scratching your head when you're watching it for the first time. And we see again this very creepy stuffed animal that's in a pool
Yep, the
floating,
black and
and
white.
everything's black and white except this stuffed animal, which is pink
Right.
and white, and it's burned on one half or something like that. It's very
Hmm.
horror film like. But this particular beginning before the credits roll shows somebody in a kind of hazmat suit pulling out the stuffed animal from the pool and sticking it in bags that say evidence of some kind. And then we see
Right.
lots of different items in different bags of evidence. And it's meant to just leave you puzzled.
It's kind of creating a story, like every other episode, you get this little brief clip per se of this black and white error, and like every so often you're getting a little bit more knowledgeable. Okay, like now there's hazmat suits. Like, what is this? And that's one of the things that I love about how Vince Gilligan films and directs this show is like you have the main story of going on between, with Walt and his family and Jesse, but then you also have this thing that's happening that's kind of apart from it. It's not mentioned at all in the story or anything like that. You just see it, and then you're kind of it's leaving the viewer to kind of come up with his own like idea of what it is. I think it's almost like a choose your own adventure type in a movie form, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's definitely meant to not explain something, but to confuse you, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's the way they give the information little bits at a time. They're revealing something, but it's just meant to draw you in and make you be more and more intrigued. But
Exactly.
all that I will say here is that what we learn later on that explains all this stuff might help explain also the title of the episode here, Down. And the symbolism of all of that we'll get to later on, but just flagging it, maybe it stands also for something that's coming down the line. So one of the first things we see, one of the first scenes in the show is Jesse and Walt communicating in some pre-arranged. They're meeting at like a quickie mart, and they're pretending not to be talking to one another, but just shopping, and they're like talking over the aisle. They're
Yep.
being, very, very careful. And that's because, we remember the last time that they were together, they were in the desert, having survived this very close call with Tuco. And
Right.
Walt had to pretend that he'd been crazy and out of his mind. And what is it that Jesse claims he was with the prostitute the whole time? Is that right?
Yeah. Wendy. He was
With
with Wendy the
Wendy.
whole
Yeah,
time.
he's with Wendy the whole time. Right.
Yep.
Um, but they're trying very hard not to leave a trail of any kind of connection between the two of them. And so
Right.
there's
They're
a kind of
very
paranoia.
paranoid.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But Walt says that he can't have contact with Jesse because he's, quote, mending fences with Skylar. That phrase really I find that really funny. I mean, wouldn't he be trying to tear down fences between him and Skylar? Why would he be trying to mend fences between him and Skylar? And it made me think of this famous poem by Robert Frost called Mending Wall. You ever read that poem?
Mm, don't
It
believe so.
begins it begins with this line, something there is that doesn't love a wall. And then he goes on, and it's a longer poem. And he describes these two neighbors who are like farmers, and they have a kind of rock wall that separates their farms, and I guess it probably keeps livestock in or something. And he says every spring they meet together at mending time, and they rebuild the wall that has sort of fallen down a little bit, and they just walk the wall and they repair it. They put the barrier back up between them, and in the very end. Of the poem, there's a line where he says, "Good fences make good neighbors." The point of that, right, is that like as long as we know where everybody stands, we can get along well, right? As long as you have your privacy and I have my privacy, and we respect each other's privacy, we can get along. But that poem came to mind as I was thinking, why did they use that phrase? I'm mending fences with Skylar. Like he's repairing the boundary between them.
I was gonna say I don't. Like when you think like mending the fence or something like that, he's just trying to say, all right, I need to make this lie more believable so that she can get behind what I'm saying. He's not going to be like, hey, I have to go fess up so I can repair our relationship. He's just like, hey, I got to find a way to lie more and lie better
Mm,
so we can get past this because he is just not. He's almost pulling a Marie like with the whole thing when she was not going to admit anything about
mm,
stealing the tiara, like he wouldn't do it. And
yeah,
that's
right.
that's kind of what his point of view is, I think.
Yeah. Well, whatever it means, the phrase that he uses there, mending the fence, he means I'm trying to repair the relationship. But what I think you're saying is that by doubling down on the lie to make it more believable, he's mending a fence between the two of them. And
Hmm.
the the breakfasts that he starts to make for Skylar and Walter Jr., which Skylar at the end calls, what does she call them? Desperate
Desperate
breakfasts.
breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed there was no sign of veggie bacon in these desperate
That's
breakfasts.
probably was his biggest flaw. I mean,
That's
he
right.
probably could have gotten her
If he had
right away,
only
but
offered her some veggie bacon, that's the
yeah,
way to a woman's heart. That's what I've always
yeah,
said.
it just shows that he's still kind of amateur with this,
Yeah. But to Bryan Cranston's credit as an actor, it's so clear that he's fake, that he's acting totally weird.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, he's
that
just overdoing everything. Every single like motion and like the way he talks, the way he moves, everything is just overdone, you know?
yeah,
And like you
right.
said, it's obvious.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking you were right on the money about those cancer support groups. That's a great idea. I really need to get back to that, right? Like complete BSing.
I
Yeah.
feel like he also is just like not giving Skylar any credit whatsoever to pick up on what's going on, you know? And obviously we see in this episode that she knows right away that he's lying and that he would just will not admit to it, you know? But yeah, he just is
Because
he
of the
doesn't
phone, you mean?
right. That was the biggest thing, right? And
So
she knows for a fact that he had his phone, and well, she doesn't know for a fact, I guess, but like everything that happened prior to this
there's good
point.
reason to think that he's lying about the
Yeah,
phone. But critically, she's not going to say, Walt, I know about the phone.
no, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty. I feel like I've seen this play out before in relationships, where it's
Hmm.
like, like tell me what I did wrong. No, you have to tell me what you did wrong. Like
Right.
it's
Right.
it's kind of these things like
I'm not going to do it. Yeah.
yeah, you know. So they were both playing a game and they both double down. Like the real question I have is where was Skylar going this whole time?
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
time she
Well,
would leave, where'd she go?
you're right about she's playing a game and he's playing a game on her. And in
Hmm.
fact, Jesse's playing a game on his friend, and Jesse's parents are kind of playing a game with him. Like everybody's playing games with everyone in this episode.
Yep.
And it's painful to watch because we kind of know both sides. You know,
Hmm.
we know Skylar's side, we know Walt's side, we know Jesse's side, we know his parents' side, and we can kind of understand why everyone is playing the game, but we know that everyone's playing a game. We
Right.
know that Jesse's friend, his in-laws actually are not coming over that weekend, right? We just know that his wife is not comfortable with Jesse staying there, so we kind of we kind of have an omniscient view of things, but the fact that they're playing a game, what is up with that? What does that reveal? I thought it was interesting that so we see Walt do this breakfast and try to make things good with Skylar, and then she just leaves. Doesn't say anything.
Hmm.
She just leaves, right? And then the very next scene is Jesse in the law office
Hmm.
when his parents come and give him the eviction notice. Where so the way they put these together, these stories, they kind of match each other in a kind of opposite way.
Right.
So when Skylar is trying to make Walt feel guilty the whole time,
Hmm.
Jesse is trying to make his mom feel guilty for kicking him out. I can't, what a horrible
Right.
parent. I can't believe you're doing this. He
Hmm.
calls her a bitch, his mother, and so he's laying on the guilt in the same way that Skylar's laying on the guilt on Walt, right? But they're kind of mirror images of each other there.
They are. Yeah. Well, that's what makes it so painful to watch. You go
Mm,
from one character's just demise to another character's demise, and they kind of just bounce off each other, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. Especially for Jesse. Like
yeah.
it started off with like, well, I lost my money. That sucks. Hopefully I can get Walt to split his half with me,
Do we
but
know what
I
happened to
still.
his $600?
Oh, well, Walt made the accusation that he's like
He
you
smoked it,
smoked it
right?
all, right? And he was on, yeah, he was smoking drugs or doing whatever. I don't know if he was on meth or
Do we
not,
know
but
that he spent that $600 on drugs though?
I would assume so. But like,
But we don't know, so we're left to
right,
wonder.
right. But it was just it just shows that like even though he really needed the money, you saw him get even more and more and more desperate and angry as like things became more real, like when the movers are moving everything out, and he was like, "What? This is really happening?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I
and
think it's important to know that Jesse did not think that his parents would follow through
right.
when they
When
show
they give
up.
him 72 hours, I think,
Yeah, right.
to get
But
out.
he's trying to call their bluff, which makes us probably, think that okay, they've probably threatened things like this before, maybe
Right.
not this exact thing, but things like it. And Jesse
Hmm.
has learned not to take them seriously. And so we know that his parents are trying to be good parents and do the best thing for him. And you can tell they're trying to make themselves tough, but of course it's an extremely difficult, painful thing for them
Right.
as well. And you know, his mother, it's so painful to watch when he's accusing his mother of being a bad parent. He's obviously trying to manipulate her, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, he's lying through his teeth. He's like, "Oh, I was thinking about going to business school." It's like
Yeah, right.
your
We're
own desperate
dialoguing.
thing, like his desperate breakfast of saying that, it's just
Yeah, yeah,
it's
right. No, so
pathetic.
they're both over, what did you say, overshooting or overplaying or over
Yeah. I mean,
so it's
goes hand in hand, I
obvious
guess.
that they're not, neither one of them is sincere.
Right.
And we see this kind of again playing out in a kind of mirror fashion.
What were your thoughts on do you think Jesse was justified in um getting half of what
Yeah, I wrote
Walt
that question
had?
down to ask you. Yeah, you're supposed to answer that question.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Like they had they had a plan and they had to execute it. I mean, it sucks that his money was in the car, but Jesse was trying to leave when Tugo got him.
Yeah, I think we
Like
can
saying this.
assume.
Yeah.
I think we can assume that had they escaped in the car, which was their plan,
Hmm.
and let's say they needed the money, they would have used together. They would have used that money,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
If they were in dire straits.
Yep.
Let's say they were in, if so. I think the reason this is a complicated question is it raises the question of like what is the nature of their partnership?
Right.
Do they have a common good that they're after, or are they simply two individuals who happen to cooperate and help each other? If it's the latter thing, then that's Walt's money and he gets to do with it whatever he wants. It doesn't matter how unlucky Jesse is, how
Right.
what the hand that fortune deals him, they're not related. He doesn't owe him anything. That sucks for you. What does he say? Your problems are your problems.
Right. Yeah. Why should I
But
be punished for your, whatever?
right, right. But if they have a partnership that is more than just a, you know, a partnership of convenience where, it works out where it works out. But if there actually is some kind of common good that they share, then that kind of relationship, I think, would be able to absorb or recognize misfortune that when it happens to one half and to say, I will supply what fortune has taken from you,
Right.
that there's a kind of justice within that whole system. Think of it
Right.
like maybe two nations as opposed to one nation, like if there's some misfortune that happens in one nation, the other nation isn't obliged to care for that other
Right.
nation,
And
right?
I
But if
think we
there's a
see the relationship, the partnership starts out as, we'll do this, but ultimately I'm looking out for myself. And then towards the end of this episode, they kind of come together a little bit.
Yeah, well,
Um,
let's remember how it starts. Remember, it starts
yeah.
with Walt holding a gun to Jesse's head,
Yep.
metaphorically speaking. What I don't understand is why Jesse didn't say, "Look, bro, I got nothing to lose. You give me your half of the money, you give me half of your money, or I'm going to the cops and I'm just going to tell them all, because I got nothing to
Yeah.
lose. I'll at least have I'll be prison, but it'll be a place to sleep at night, better than what I got
Yeah.
now. You give me a better deal. And maybe that's what Walt starts to realize, in which case Jesse then is sort of playing the same rules of justice that Walt was playing when he started the partnership, right? Because Walt's trying to say, no, we're two independent people. Jesse could have said, there's nothing independent about you basically forcing me to serve you as your slave. That's kind of the way it was at the beginning. But the thing that removed that barrier was the mutual guilt that they both incurred through the murder
Right.
of Crazy Eight and what's the other guy? My point though is that Jesse could have relied on that mutual guilt and said, look, I can go to the cops right now and end this whole thing for both of us, and you got to give me one good reason, not why I shouldn't do that.
Well, like he didn't get to that point, but he was obviously going to make it so that Walt could not hide Jesse anymore. He was calling him nonstop, and then he shows up with the RV right when Skylar leaves. It's like, and at that point, when Jesse does roll up with the RV, or he's parked right outside, like that's when I believe that's right after Skylar and Walt had their kind of deeper conversation, and she took off, and he just blew up on Jesse. Like all the anger that he had from that conversation, he just threw it up all over Jesse.
Yeah.
And they fought it out, and then they're like, all right, cool.
Yeah, need a shower. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Would you like some breakfast?
It's like right. Yeah. What an interesting scene I thought in the show was when Jesse goes to his friend's house, and they were bandmates.
Yeah, let's get the band back together, man.
Yeah, right. Just the contrast there. Like, it's another look at what Jesse's life could be if he wanted, like this is a guy who obviously whenever they were probably in high school, like they were in the same position, and
Right.
this guy took better choices, obviously married, a beautiful woman, and has a handsome kid, and has like a decent house, and he's got his life together.
He applied
And
himself.
right. And the contrast with Jesse's just utter disaster. And that guy's kind of is a little bit of a doofus, right? Like he doesn't see that Jesse's playing him, the way the wife does. And the way it kept focusing on the kid, I think it shows that the wife is thinking, I don't want this guy anywhere near my kid. I don't want him in my home near my kid.
Right. And she probably knows of his past, and probably knows of
right.
Jesse. So she's like,
oh yeah,
no, this is not happening.
This is not going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
Then we also learned that Jesse basically has no other friends.
Yeah, he said he tried Badger, and
Yeah, he tried Badger. So why didn't Badger follow through? Because I thought he and Badger were good.
Yeah, I thought that
we
was
don't
pretty. No, it doesn't mention it.
Now Badger's kind of a basket case himself, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was like sleeping on somebody else's couch,
Yeah,
himself.
that's
So
true. Yeah.
anyway, we know that Jesse's lying to his friend, and we know that his friend is lying to him. I thought, I don't know if there's anything to this, maybe it would just be an accident, but I thought it was interesting when Jesse sneaks into the junkyard or whatever it is where the RV is, and he falls into the porta potty. The chemical that runs out is this blue filth. The only other blue chemical that we know of in the show is the meth that they make.
Right, methylamine.
And so, it kind of made me think like he's swimming in the consequences of their enterprise, of making this blue meth. Again, maybe it's an accident, and they didn't really mean to intend any kind of overlap there. But I just thought that was an interesting thing if they did intend it. So the blue filth in the porta potty, reminiscent of the blue meth.
And that was right after he had gotten his bike stolen.
Oh gosh,
the Quickie Mart. So like, I mean,
right.
I know that this episode was showing like the downfall really of the relationships of both Walt and Jesse, but I feel like Jesse is the one that just really has it so much worse, because it's like, okay, Walt, your wife's not talking to you. Cool. But Jesse lost his house, lost his bike, doesn't really have any friends to rely on in a time of need, and
That's
is
right.
now covered in filth. It's like he is,
Yeah.
and kind of like lost any relationship with his mother and his dad. And
Yeah. 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 I mean, they're both suffering consequences of their own choices, but
yeah,
Jesse is also facing misfortune. He's just
right.
unlucky, and it's hitting
Hmm.
him a lot harder than it's hitting Walt. And
Right.
so this plays into that question of, does Jesse have a claim on some of Walt's money if they have a partnership where they have to mutually care for each other?
Yep.
It's like kind of like a marriage, where
Hmm.
if one spouse is, sick or something and gets unlucky, the other spouse can say, well, it sucks for you, like, no, like they would say the family is suffering because one half of the family is sick, something like that.
Right. And who knows? Maybe Walt just knows that if he gave half of his money to Jesse, that he'd smoke it all and would still need more money, Like,
Sure, and it's not going to benefit him. Yeah,
yeah,
perhaps. Well, it's not.
So,
I think he doesn't realize the depth of the situation that Jesse's in. He hangs
no.
up on him before he learns that he's homeless.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so Walter Jr., or should we say Flynn?
Flynn.
Okay, on one hand, this could just be a random, like, well, teenagers. Some people like to change their name. If you were like named, I don't know, something like Nathaniel, you might change your name to
Right.
Nathan. People do that.
People do
Um,
that. I think I know of someone.
yeah, yeah. So why Flynn? That's kind of a weird name, right? And is there another reason why he might be changing his name? Is he embarrassed to be named after his father?
Yeah, I mean, what does Skylar say? It's like to Walt, he's like, well, like when he asked her about like Flynn, and she's like, well, your disappearance really upset him, and obviously it did. He's been like very awkward around um Walt,
But
except
wouldn't
for
it
the
make
the
just as
breakfast. Almost like the breakfast almost won him over, though. I feel like,
yeah, yeah, right.
you know. So I don't know. Yeah, Flynn. I don't know. Weird.
But it's evidence of a growing rift between Walt and his son. And I'll
Right.
note that when he's in that scene where Walt's like, you know what, let's go do something fun, and then he takes him to go practice driving.
Hmm.
That or I should say, several times when they're in the car, Walt calls him Walt. Doesn't call him Walter Jr. He calls him Walt, and he does it in ways that are obvious that he's trying to remind him to call him Walt,
Hmm.
except for once when Walter Jr. makes the mistake and hits the road marker thing.
Hmm.
When Walt gets out of the car, he calls him Flynn. He's frustrated with him. I think that in a way you can get a glimpse into Walt's mind where he's trying to remind Walter Jr., your name is Walt, but when he's frustrated
Yeah.
with him, he kind of gives in and says, your name is Flynn.
The whole like both feet on the gas and brake, like he was almost like upset that his buddy taught him how to do that. It's like, no, like your legs work fine. You got this.
I mean, the
Um,
guy does have cerebral palsy, right?
exactly.
So
Like
I
you
don't know
can
if his
see
if
that.
his legs work as well as, but his dad is trying to say, let's not assume that you're going to struggle with this more than the average person.
Right.
Let's assume you're not, and let's see if you can do it. And
Yeah.
that's probably the right way to go about it.
Yeah. Again,
Okay,
with him being like just beat up this episode, this is an opportunity for him to get some kind of joy out of this partner, like bonding time with his son, but was still not able to do that.
yeah, I don't know if anybody really enjoys learning to drive with their. I mean, it cannot but be frustrating, I would think. It's not like, hey, good time, let's go for a spin.
Well,
I just don't see that happening. But
find that out in about 13 years.
yeah, right. Okay, so the scene when Walt is just so tired of being treated by Skylar like, he's not there. He says, "Hey, can we talk?" And
Hmm.
then he does something that I think was reminiscent of just him being the most desperate ever. He says, "I apologize for everything." Okay, what's that? What does that mean?
Right.
And then he even apologizes for, quote, his desire for privacy, unquote. Like, why
Hmm.
are you? And obviously, I mean, probably I should say, probably he's apologizing for the thing that he lied about, where he said, "Yeah, I just wanted to go for walks out in nature, and be private." And so he's trying to cover for that and say, "Yeah, I shouldn't have like gone on all those walks in nature," when we know he wasn't doing that. But if you think about it, like his desire for privacy isn't by itself something that he needs to apologize for. He could have said, "I should have communicated to you more," or I wish I had been more open with you about how much I needed to be alone," or something. But he doesn't say that. It's just a desperate attempt to win her back. But she's marshaling a complete guilt campaign in every
Hmm.
possible way. She's trying to signal to him, "I am not happy with you, and you have to figure out why, and you have to come tell me about it." And she's,
Exactly.
at the climax of that scene, she says, "You tell me today, right now, what you have been up to." And he still says, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so we know
Yeah.
that the fence is still very much, we might say, the border wall between them is still very much intact.
Yeah. Like she's seen and heard so many lies at this point that she knows what it is and what it's not. And it
Right.
almost looked like she was like about to be won over in that attempt on the couch, but she
Yeah.
was still waiting for the kicker. And
Right.
that's the one thing that he couldn't do, you know?
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
especially like earlier in the episode when he was like, you know what I think that sound was my
It's the
ringtone or my
alarm.
alarm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, that must be it. It's like, come on, like this is another like show that he is not giving Skylar any benefit of the doubt of knowing anything. Like she's just gonna
Right.
believe anything I say.
Right. Right. Well, at this point, to admit to everything isn't to say, "Okay, I've been doing this weird thing. It's illegal to try and make some money for you," because it involves murder.
Right.
I mean, like it's unbelievable. And I say that, I use that word on purpose. Like it's hard to believe the kind of stuff he would admit, right? If he did. So, and then I'll note that when they're yelling at each other, he says to her, "Do you know what I have done for this family?" He's still telling himself, "I'm doing all of this for the family. You just need to let it happen. Let me do
Hmm.
what the way I need to do it. Just know that I'm doing it all for the family." I think in that scene that it shows that Walt is not seeing the reality very well. And similarly, I thought it was absolutely amazing when Jesse is yelling at Walt and they're having this altercation. Jesse calls his own parents, quote, "kleptomaniacs." He's accusing them of stealing their house from him.
Right. Well, we hear a little bit of it when Jesse was saying like I was the only one there for her when she was going through her cancer treatment. Like she
Right.
wanted me to
But do
have this
you
house and you were taking it.
yeah, right. But then he says, "I fed her lunch every day," and his mom says, "No, you didn't." I mean, who do we
Yeah.
believe? I believe his mom, I
Well,
don't believe
especially
that.
since he didn't come over on top of that. He just kind of accepted her response. So yeah,
Right, right.
she was the one that was more believable.
Yeah, but it shows that Jesse likewise is not in reality. If he
Hmm.
sees his parents as kleptomaniacs, when we know what a kleptomaniac is, right? Like we have the example of
Exactly.
Marie, and
Hmm.
that's not what his parents are doing, right? One final thing I wanted to bring up that I noticed in this episode, when Walt finally succumbs to Jesse's pleas for half of the money, and Walt pulls the money out and he's dividing it up and he's got it all in equal stacks. and he has
I
an
know what you're gonna
odd
say.
he has an odd number of stacks.
Yep.
He could split that last stack up to be 50-50, but he keeps that odd last stack for himself.
Yep.
And then I had to ask my wife what kind of little baggie, the little blue baggie he puts the money in. It's a
You didn't know
diaper.
what that was?
No, I didn't know it was a diaper bag. Yeah, no, we have a
Oh,
little
come
diaper
on.
bin that we put them in. But
Oh
anyway,
yeah, no, those things are clutch.
yeah, right. Well, do you think it's symbolic that he puts the money in a dirty diaper bag? Like,
That might be a stretch. I think it was just convenient because it was in the new baby room next to
yeah,
the money was
maybe.
stuffed in the diaper box, and obviously what was right there.
Right.
I don't know.
But it
Could be
just
something, but
to me it just shows it's dirty money, I mean, it's money
yeah.
that they
Mhm.
gained in a dirty way. But
Yeah.
anyway,
And with
what
with him holding on to that extra amount, I think
yeah,
is
what
just
do you
kind
think of
of
that? What's up with that?
I think it just ultimately shows that even though Walt is appearing to have a compassion for Jesse and kind of be like, okay, partner, that he is still holding some on to this like selfishness of
Hmm,
my needs are above your needs,
hmm,
and therefore I'm taking it. Like he's rationalizing it out in his head because you could see him grab it and then he holds it for like a second or two and then puts it back, and so he, yeah, I think it's just showing that he still, no matter what, is going to pick himself when it comes to scenarios like that.
yeah. So either he's not convinced that Jesse deserves half, and
Hmm.
really he's not giving Jesse what Jesse is due. He's being charitable and just giving Jesse some money.
Right.
It's got to be one of those. How does he view himself? I think he sees it not as I'm giving Jesse his due, but that I'm giving Jesse some money because I feel bad for him. Which then would say that Walt views the nature of their relationship as being two separate individuals who cooperate sometimes rather than a partnership with a common good who will help each other absorb the various misfortune that each one encounters. Well, I think that's it. In general, this is just a very depressing episode. It's teeing some things up, I think, for us, but so far we're getting just a reminder that they've done some pretty crazy things, and now they're having to suffer some very natural consequences. It's not comfortable. So, all right, well, that's where we'll leave it. Just a reminder to everybody that we do have a Patreon account set up now, and we encourage people to join that for the sake of helping us. We want to be able to get some microphones and better equipment, and ultimately we want to be able to put this podcast on other podcast platforms, but we need a little bit of extra cash to be able to do that. But also, if you do that, you'll be in the running for a raffle to join us on the last season on one of the episodes to get early release with some of the episodes as they come out. Right, Cabe? Anything else?
Right. They come out on Monday. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure as this goes on, we'll probably think of some other cool things to put on there. And
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, lots
yeah,
of swag, some flair,
well, some merch.
merch. There you go. All right. Well, with that, we'll sign off. See y'all next episode.